Hello there, everybody. It's that time of the week again. Time to know a little less nothing. Welcome to Knowing Nothing, the show made by the curious for the curious. I'm your host, Mickey Roberts. This is now my 18th episode over the last few months, so we're still in the early stages of the show, but already looking back, I'm noticing a sort of pattern in my topic choices. I'm super curious, obviously, and I love learning about why things are the way they are, how things happen, which is why I like to do a bunch of Did You Know episodes, like the one about synesthesia that I just did last week, or the one on why we hiccup. I like science, and I like history, although I didn't always. But then, I'm also finding it really rewarding to make other kinds of episodes, like the ones that raise awareness for causes and organizations. I've only done one like that so far, the one on deep vein thrombosis for the NATF, and I have another one planned, but it's still in the scheduling phase. These episodes really mean a lot to me because they're an opportunity to help spread the word in a bigger way than I could in the past. And I want to do more of them. But lately, I'm finding myself really enjoying the episodes I'm doing where I lean more into human experience, like Empathy Man, or Gratitude, or A Made Bed for a Clear Head. Stuff like that. They're a bit more personal, and I think I like that because it allows me an opportunity to reflect on my own perceptions about the world, about my friends, about myself. It's a different kind of knowing nothing, I suppose. I say this because I'm curious to know what you guys as listeners are enjoying and want more of. So please email me at mickey@soundpollination.com and tell me what you think. I take your opinions really seriously, and I'd love to know how this new show is being received. That said, my episode today is going to be one of those human experience ones. More of an exercise in self-improvement. For me, and hopefully for someone else too. So let's do it. Today, I want to explore the idea of committing to something, and more specifically, overcommitting to a bunch of things. For as long as I can remember, I have had a consistent problem with overcommitting myself. Growing up, I was always stressed out, behind deadlines, making promises I knew I wouldn't be able to keep, being on the high school hockey team and also trying to do a play, or promising a friend that I'd read their 10-page paper and share my thoughts when I had my own 10-page paper to write. And I still do this today. The only difference is that as I've gotten older, the commitments I'm making are, I don't want to say more important, but more demanding and more detrimental to me if I come up short. And I think this overcommitting issue, paired with my procrastination habits, has boiled up to a point where I need to talk about it in order to sift through to find a solution. There's a poem by Robert Service called The Cremation of Sam McGee, and there's a line in that poem my dad used to always say to me: "A promise made is a debt unpaid." I think I said this in past episodes, but one of the biggest virtues my dad instilled in me was integrity. And so making a promise has, in my mind, always sort of been like loaning out my integrity. And if I don't keep that promise, I don't get it back. So that idea has sort of always been with me. And if I say I'm going to do something, I better damn do it. And if I don't, there's this heavy feeling of failure and disappointment, which I have a hard time dealing with. So needless to say, I'm trying to figure out how best to balance my commitments. And I've come up with a few ways to do that. The first is, I think, the most obvious, and that is to just make less commitments. Duh, right? But for people like me, that's easier said than done. If I were to classify myself as either an optimist or a pessimist, I would probably say I'm an optimist, which I think many people would agree is the, quote, better way to be. But it comes with its own set of problems. The first being that as an optimist, I have an extremely distorted perception of time. I always think I have more time than I actually do. I always think things are going to take less time to complete than they actually take. And I always think I'm more capable of accomplishing a task than I often am. Some might call that cocky or big-headed, but I'm going to call it overly optimistic. But at the end of the day, no matter what you call it, it's an unrealistic way to approach situations. My girlfriend tells me this all the time. When she asks me when I'm going to be home, and I say in 30 minutes or so, she always knows it's much more likely going to be an hour. And this skewed perception affects how I approach taking on new commitments. For example, a lot of the work that I do is video and audio editing work. And I have a friend who asked me to edit her voiceover acting reel. And she offered to pay me, but because she's my friend, I refused to take her money. And I told her that I'd do it as a favor. Because I want to be that friend that people can rely on to help them out when they need it. But when I said I would do this for her, I was in the middle of starting Sound Pollination. I had just accepted a new job as an editor for something else, and I was already working for a company that requires quite a bit of my time. And I was prepping these episodes once a week. So I didn't really have the time to be editing this reel, but I ignored that reality and promised I would do it. That was in September, and I only just finished her reel yesterday. Not such a good friend. And we've talked about it, and thankfully she understands and she forgave me. But there's no question that my, quote, favor to her really wasn't a favor at all. It was a debt unpaid, and if she weren't such a forgiving person, this probably could have affected our friendship. And it would have been my fault. I put myself in a situation that I couldn't handle because seeing her smile and say thank you when I made her that promise to finish her reel was more worth it to me than risking not being able to deliver on that promise. And I think this is the big underbelly of my commitment issue. I don't like letting people down. And for some reason, I equate saying no to opportunities to help people to letting them down. I'm a yes man, as some might call it. But saying no when someone asks you for a favor is not disappointing them. If they have any respect for you, they'll understand. You'd love to help them out, but you just don't have the time. You're respecting the limits of your ability and the quality of care that you think they deserve. If anything, you're respecting the commitments you've already made because you're not further dividing your time that you've already allotted to do the things that you're already doing. I heard something from a motivational speaker on YouTube whose name I, for the life of me, just can't remember. So if you're hearing this, YouTube guy, please don't sue me. I want to credit you here. But he said that overcommitment is actually undercommitment. Because the more you commit to, the less time, energy, passion, focus you actually have to be able to put into each of the things that you've committed to. You can't give 10 projects 100% of your love at the same time. And in trying, you're really coming up short on all of them. It's much better to just value the obligations that you have now enough to focus on each one of them one at a time. It'll save you stress and ensure that you will always do your best work. Give it your all. So, everything I've said so far has all been said with regard to commitments you've made to other people. But what about the commitments that you make to yourself? One of the longest and most detrimental problems that I've had with commitment is that I used to never value my own responsibilities as much as those of other people. That is to say, it was more important to me to make sure that I satisfied my commitments to you, even if doing that was getting in the way of my own obligations. Like the 10-page paper thing I mentioned before. And when you first hear this, you might think, well, who does that? Of course I need to prioritize myself. But it's more subtle than that. I have a lot of work to do tomorrow, for example. But one of my very good friends is performing in a play, and I promised him I'd go see it. It's probably not wise of me to go tomorrow because I'd lose up to 3 or 4 hours of time that I could spend working. But knowing me, I'm probably going to go anyway because I promised him that I would. And I don't know what the more noble thing to do is there. On the one hand, I'm being a supportive friend, and on the other, I'm being irresponsible. And considering a lot of the work I need to do tomorrow is for other people, whether they be my employers or my family friends that I, again, am doing favors for, the real choice I'm making is to risk disappointing one friend or disappointing another. All the while, I've disappointed myself by even putting myself in this situation. There's no clear-cut solution, because I'm already too far down the rabbit hole. I've overcommitted. I've made promises I'm not entirely sure I can keep. But of course, being the optimist, I always tell myself not to worry because it'll all get done in the end. But what happens when it doesn't? Am I ready to face the consequences of not being able to follow through? I don't know. Overall, I think the answer is to really just take your time before you decide to add something to your plate. Don't be too impulsive or too eager to help. And dare I say it, don't be too optimistic about your ability to help, because it's actually not helpful for you to take on something you can't actually follow through on. It's just sort of delayed disappointment, I guess. Ask the questions. Is it something you can handle right now? Or are you just refusing to admit that you can't handle it? I think the ego plays a big role in this. It's hard to admit that you can't always be the guy people rely on. Sometimes you just need to close the gates and handle the stuff you already have going on before you can confidently and generously give yourself to a new responsibility. And not being able to handle it is perfectly okay. It's called honesty, and it's way more appreciated in the long run. If you're always chasing the clock to fulfill obligations, you're going to burn yourself out. And then you're not helping anyone. And you'll be all crispy. So let's make a commitment right now not to overcommit. And if you already have, then congratulations on being able to admit it. And welcome to the club. All right, I'd love to hang, but I've got a whole bunch of other commitments I need to keep. So for now, we've reached the end of yet another episode of Knowing Nothing, a show made by the curious for the curious. I'm your host, Mickey Roberts. Thank you guys for checking in, and as always, stay curious. If you like my show and you want to support it, there's a really easy way to do it. Patreon is a donation-based platform that allows us to keep doing what we're doing, and it's fueled by supporters and lovers of the show like you. Anything from pledging $1 a month, less than the price of a cup of coffee, makes a huge difference for us. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping us to keep our shows alive. We're making them for you, and we're able to because of you. And for that, we're all really grateful. I have a few sponsors I need to thank too. Amazon.com. If you like buying things online and you also like sound pollination, pop on over to our website, soundpollination.com, and click on the Amazon banner at the top of the page. It'll take you directly to their site, and you can buy your items, and Amazon will give us a small percentage of your purchase for sending you their way, and it costs you nothing on top. Second is Leather and Earth, a small batch handmade boot company based in New York City. These boots are made in Portugal, styled to be gender neutral, and built to be durable. They're the kind of boots you will have until you're in your coffin. And if you use the discount code Pollinate10, then you get 10% off your purchase, and they donate $25 to Sound Pollination. It's a win-win. All right, guys, thank you again for supporting Knowing Nothing, the show made by the curious for the curious. I'll be back again next week, but until then, I'm Mickey Roberts. Stay curious.